The sun sign is the one placement that even people who don't know anything about astrology know about astrology. But what does the sun placement really mean in the context, the wider context of a whole astrological chart? If that's your question, then this is your answer. So if you're just here for the short answer, here it is, right at the beginning. Your sun sign indicates your core essential essence, your key area of strength and your vitality and your will. So if that's all you're after the short answer, you've had it. But if you want to stick around for the longer answer, it's about to get way more interesting. So let's begin by considering the physical sun. So obviously it's at the very center of our solar system. It's by far, by great orders of magnitude, the biggest object in the whole solar system, and everything else literally exists in its orbit. It's also easily the most important part of our solar system because everything else exists in its orbit, and of course that's why we call it a solar system, because the sun's at the center. And it's so big its gravitational pull keeps the rest of us in the solar system together. In this way we can see how the sun fulfills a role in the solar system analogous to the role that the heart plays in the human body. So just as the heart keeps the body pumped with the blood that it needs to survive, the sun keeps us supplied with the light that we need to stay alive. In fact, it's maybe more that the sun is to our planet what the heart is to the body. So of course then the sun placement in a vacuum, if we don't consider aspects or dignities or whatever else it might be, the sun placement is the single most important planet in an astrological chart. So we've covered that already, but what exactly does it represent? The sun is the ruling planet of the sign of Leo, and the metal which is associated with the sign of Leo is gold. So it may already be obvious based on just the color, but there's always going to be a strong link between the idea of gold and the idea of the sun. In the medieval practice of alchemy, gold was held up as the end goal for that practice and for practitioners. I think it's quite widely understood now that alchemy wasn't just people trying to turn base metals into gold, but it was in fact, and that whole thing was an analogy essentially for what was a spiritual practice in the pursuit of essentially attaining perfection and ascension, I guess you could call it. So then your sun placement in your chart can point you in the direction of the path which for you could be the best one for you to pursue in order to make developmental progress. In other words, it gives you a good example of what the alchemical gold is for you in this lifetime. Another strong motif that comes through with the sun and with mythology around the sun is that of the solar hero. So in a lot of myths and fairy tales and even like modern movies and novels and TV shows, you get the same basic archetype of a hero. Is usually a masculine hero who's given some kind of mission, and the whole story is basically about the trials and tribulations that he goes through in order to achieve that goal. And usually the goal is only achievable when he has to slay an adversary, a monster or something like that, which often represents his shadow. So as I mentioned, that it's typically speaking, it's a masculine main character in these types of stories, and that's definitely been a feature certainly over the last few millennia, or certainly since the age of Aries, which is definitely partly to do with patriarchy and us living in a male-dominated society, but I think also it's partly to do with the fact that the energy of the sun is, archetypically speaking, is the masculine counterpart to the more feminine lunar energy. And to be clear, that polarity doesn't refer so much to sex or to gender as it does to a metaphysical polarity that has otherwise been called yin and yang in other systems and by other names in other systems. So on this scale of, we're calling it masculine feminine energy, the masculine polarity is concerned with the imposition of the self on the other, the imposition of the individual on the outer environment. And that's the same drive that has led human beings essentially to impose ourselves on nature and construct houses and city walls and so on, basically to keep nature out, which is basically what walls and so on are for. And that's also essentially led to empire and conquest and all these things. So then we can see that the true drive of the solar hero is essentially to distinguish himself. The monster defeated in the final act, as I said, it could be a monster, it could be an adversary or whoever it is, represents the unconscious essentially. It represents the unaware and the unevolved even. So the mission of the solar hero is essentially to individuate, which is a term coined by Carl Jung. Your sun placement can help you to understand what kind of solar hero you are. If your life is one of these stories, your sun placement can tell you, and of course you're going to be at the center of it, just like the sun is at the center of the solar system, and that really shows the kind of solar hero that you're called to be in this life, and also shows perhaps the kind of tests and trials that you can expect to undertake on your way to emerging as an individual, standing tall, secure in yourself and proud of your accomplishments. I mentioned before that probably the most obvious solar property, essentially, of the physical sun is the giving of light. And that same light that literally allows us to see through these two eyes, on a metaphorical level, will lead us out of unconscious anonymity and into our own right as an individual being filled with consciousness, which, in a word, enlightenment. In that sense, the sun isn't just like Earth's heart, as I said earlier. It's more like our own personal, individual, astrological God, really. It's the inner spark of divinity. It's our calling, or you could even say our soul. Therefore, something else that you can glean from understanding your own sun placement is to understand something about your soul's purpose in this lifetime on Earth, like the true heart of the mission that your soul has agreed to undertake in this incarnation. Essentially, that's your sun placement. Alright, those are my thoughts on the sun placement. So thank you for watching. If you're interested in seeing more of this astrological type content, you can let me know by hitting the like button, the subscribe button. If you want to go on further and leave me a comment, that'd be even better. Alright, so I hope to see you next time.